All right.
Okay.
The City Council work session for November 2nd, 2020 is hereby called to order. A roll call, please, Sue.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Cofield,
Here.
Councilor Finley,
Here.
Councilor Bacon,
Here.
and Mayor Rogers.
Here.
So Councilor Martinez Plancarte is absent this evening, and Councilor Yarnell Holloman should be joining us soon. And District 5 seat is vacant at this time.
Right. All right. Moving right along. Review of the council agenda and meeting. Any questions or comments, folks? All right. I've got one, and it's a question of sort of the order. I wondered if there's a possibility, or if it makes any sense to flip items 6C and 6B. Okay, is that okay? If we just flip those. The other thing, folks, is we're trying to have an executive session at 8:30. So, and I think Doug has already agreed to, maybe if we have to, we'll move an item until the next meeting, but we're shooting for 8:30 for the executive session. All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
we can't flip 6A and 6C. The CET needs to come first, followed by SDCs. So are you saying move the Riverfront
I'm saying
plan?
C before B.
So moving the Riverfront plan comp amendment down?
No. A stays the same, and then we'll go to 6C and then 6B.
Okay.
Is that okay? All right.
Yep.
All right. Any business items, folks? Okay. Seeing none. All right. Presentations. Here we go. Promote development of housing affordability, such as houselessness, transitional housing, workforce housing. Mr. Rux.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members, how are you tonight? Everybody's got the wave and the thumbs up. Good. So this is continuing our discussion that we've had on your council goal, as the mayor indicated, promoting development of housing affordability, such as houselessness, transitional housing, and workforce housing. So I want to set some context. I'm not going to read what I know you all read in your packet before the meeting, but I will hit some of the highlights. And so the first is kind of like, why are we talking about this? Well, Newberg has been addressing the issue of affordable housing for over a decade. As some of you may know, based upon recent data, is that 28.6% of Newberg's households are rent burdened. And that actually number keeps going up year over year. That puts us in a position to have to do special reporting under House Bill 4006 on an annual basis. We conducted the housing needs analysis, and we finished that up in June of 2019, and then brought that forward to council later that summer. But there's some really, I think, interesting data that's in there. And, you know, Newberg is known as a community that's basically developed as detached single family homes, and the data, you know, spells that out. 71% of our housing stock is detached single family. Only 6% is attached single family, and then the balance 23% is multifamily. And between that period of 2005 to 2018, you know, 67% of the housing units that were built were detached single family homes. Part of that is because we have a lack of multifamily land, and so that we have a surplus in that context of land to be able to develop for single family. We only did 292 multifamily units between 2005 and 2016. And if you actually go back before that, there was a long period of time, there was a drought. There was no multifamily housing being built. I think the first one, based upon looking at the data, was the development that was behind Fred Meyer. And then kind of came Deskin Commons, and then Chehalem Point. And now recently we've got 2 projects underway, one down on River Street and one will be starting up on Springbrook Road. Our vacancy rate, when we kind of look at that and compare that to other communities around the state, we've got a low vacancy rate. At the time we did the HNA, it was 5.3%. As we're doing the update to that, it's at 5.5. So we still have a pretty low rate. the study showed that in Oregon, the vacancy rate is 9.3, in Yamhill County, it's 6.1. We're becoming more ethnically diverse. So where historically in the last census, we were 11% in our Latino population. That's grown to 13. And we know that it will grow when we get the census numbers coming out for 2020. Can't tell you what those numbers will be, but I'm predicting that they will be higher than what they were in 2010. Our median household income data in the report shows that we're lower than Yamhill County and lower than the state. So that makes it a challenge. If you have lower household income, but you have higher household prices, makes it more difficult to buy and or rent. And then you get into these issues about being cost burdened. Our median household income, well, I should say a little less than 50% of our households make less than $50,000 a year. So again, that gets to, you need about $53,000 a year as a household income to be able to try to afford a $345,000 home. It's really a challenge. So, when half of your population, a little less than half, doesn't even make that 53,000, it makes it more challenging. 340,000, the median home price, median rent rates, 1,159. We've talked before about the issue of cost burden, and I just kind of mentioned in that is that, the target is through the HUD data is, no more than 30% is paying towards your rent and utilities or your mortgage. When you go above that, we're in that cost burden category. When we get to that 50% I mentioned earlier in the presentation, you're really in the cost burden category. And that's where we get to that 28.6% number. Data showed us that 20% of our households have income of less than $25,000 a year. That makes it a challenge. They can afford a rent of $625. Where can you find a $625 one-bedroom apartment to rent in Newberg? And I'm seeing people shaking their heads. It's like it's really a challenge to find. Councilor Bacon, she knows that as well. So we have the consultants run those numbers, and to afford a two-bedroom unit at $1,300 a month, you need to be making $25.58 an hour. That's way above minimum wage. So even if you had two people in your household and had two jobs, those two combined jobs are barely getting to the minimum wage. So again, we have an income issue and we have a cost to rent and purchase issue going on at the same time. That report went on to talk about policy changes that are going to need to be made in order to address the housing affordability. Otherwise, we will continue to replicate what we've done over the past decades. And when I talk about the past decades, I'm kind of talking about, for me, looking at data is, 1970 moving forward. It's kind of the same pattern repeating itself over and over again. The study at that time indicated that we had a deficiency of about 20 acres of low density residential, 26 acres of medium density, and 62 acres of high density residential land. I can tell you those numbers are going to change with the new update in the HNA because our population projection number has gone down over the next 20-year horizon by about 2,800 people. And so as we work through that process with the ad hoc committee, eventually I'll be giving you a briefing on that probably in December. Then we asked the question, what has been done to address affordability? And so this takes us back to 2008 when Affordable Housing Task Force was created. That was established by council. You see in your packet, there were 7 items, directives that they were looking at through that process. Eventually, that report got accepted by the council in 2009, and staff moved forward in doing implementations of aspects that were in that particular report. We then moved to 2016. In 2016, 40 plus minus individuals in the community pulled together and began conversations about housing affordability, or should I say they continued the conversations that have been going on about housing affordability. That group met for about a year in total. Originally, they came to the council and had 6 proposals, work sessions. They asked the Housing Newberg group to go back and look at that information. 3 more proposals are added to the original 6. Eventually, the council, through those work sessions, asked the group to come back and prioritize their 9 plus the additional 6 that they had in their proposal. Then we reached forward to March of 2019, and we started talking about this housing affordability work program. So where we started with 9 with an alternative of 6, that list has now grown to 42. It's aging faster than me. And so the council did bring up, Dan's shaking his head, the council did give direction to staff to initially work on 3 items that Housing Newberg proposed. And so that was this R3 annexation with UGB expansions. We got that on the books. Accessory dwelling units. We had provisions that basically did everything to stop having an accessory dwelling unit. Construction excise tax, and then the missing middle housing component of that. So council said, staff, over the next 18 to 24 months, go work on these. So we finished the R3, we finished the accessory, we're working on the construction that's on your agenda later tonight. And then the legislature stepped in, addressing the issue of middle housing. So we started that, went to council. Council said, slow down, Doug. Don't get in front of what DLCD and LCDC are doing. So we pulled back on that. But I'll get to that. We're now fully engaged in that process. So with the new goal that the mayor brought up at the very beginning, and I've mentioned at least once or twice through this presentation, we started working on this timeline and trying to think about what are we going to do to address this issue of these 42 work items over the next 5 years, looking at capacity, staff capacity that we have. So we've been meeting with the Affordable Housing Commission. We stepped back and looked at where the different directives are coming from. Is it locally generated? Is it coming from the legislature? Is it coming from the Department of Land Conservation and Development? Is it coming from Oregon Housing and Community Services? Because things generate from a different perspective at different points in time. In the budget, we did identify a position to address housing within the Community Development Department. We have not moved forward with that. We've been monitoring the budget with COVID-19 issues that are taking place. Just wanted to let you know, though, that we do have a placeholder that's in that budget. And the conversation tonight would lead us hopefully to making a decision about moving forward with all of that. So that kind of then takes me to the table that's in your packet. And so when we met last time, one of the things that council brought up was looking at the sequencing, looking at the timelines of when things could be done and what would give the biggest impact. And so as we've gone back to the Affordable Housing Commission, we've gone through these conversations. And so the chart that's in your packet is actually the recommendation that came from the Affordable Housing Commission. So when you look at that, you can see on the upper lines, upper rows of that are things that we have completed. So this kind of takes us from January of 2017 and moves us forward in time. So I mentioned we finished the R3 annexation, the accessory dwelling units. We did the CDBG grant on the manufactured homes, which was very successful. We finished the HNA, which we were already talking about. We did the fee in lieu for residential parking downtown. Legislature changed the law again. We came back and revised our accessory dwelling unit related to parking. And then we addressed the issue on 2nd Street about residential and commercial space requirements on the first floor. So as I mentioned earlier, we have this ongoing reporting requirements for HB 4006 for the rent burden. We do have the Affordable Housing Commission, which oversees the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and makes recommendations to the council. So that's an ongoing task. And every year we do a notice of funding availability. We do have a seat on the Yamhill County Affordable Housing Corporation. So currently I'm sitting in that seat. So that's an ongoing quarterly meeting addressing housing issues for the cities within Yamhill County. SEDCOR stood up a housing consortium. So we've been talking about businesses and their needs for housing in order to have workers within their different facilities. It's kind of started with our healthcare side, and we will advance, Abishah will advance that forward. We'll be talking with our manufacturing companies as well. Construction excise tax, which was one that came out of the original Housing Newberg group. That has led to adjustments in the SDCs. And again, those items are later in your business session. Vertical housing, that came out of our downtown improvement plan, a partial tax abatement program for building housing above ground floors of commercial in the downtown area. So we're looking to bring that forward to council later this year or first of next year as we work through the taxing districts and those discussions. Urban renewal, of course, we're fully in that. Council's already accepted the feasibility study. You created an urban renewal district, and we're now working on creating a plan and a report. Then we have the infrastructure-based time extension, and that is a piece that came out of House Bill 2001. We're doing that analysis work right now. That will be completed and in front of you in your meeting in December. And then it has to be submitted to the state, to DLCD, by December 31st. We're updating the housing needs analysis. Again, that will finish up the committee work this calendar year, and then that'll get forward to council in your first quarter of 2021. Missing middle, and that has two components to it. That's the duplexes and then the other missing middle housing. So we're now started that process. The committee meets in its first official meeting with the consultants this week, actually on Wednesday evening. So we've already gone through some code analysis for that. Then we have this one that was identified, a full analysis of our land need. So we're also working on our economic opportunities analysis, and we're working on our public, semi-public land analysis. So we have a clear picture of what we need for residential, employment lands, and public lands over the next 20 years. In conversations I've had with the Fair Housing Council, they have offered to do a code audit for us on our design standards for residential development to make sure that we are in alignment with state law. So I will be putting some material together for them to do that code audit for us. Then we get into this longer list and we start to look out into fiscal year 21, 22. So that's looking at July, starting July 1st of 2021. And the Affordable Housing Commission looked at that and identified a multifamily housing property tax abatement program. There are different provisions in state law. We have one of those on the books, but there are others that we do not have or have not considered and are not part of our local code. And then sharing of utility lines was looked at as one for sewer and water as a way to reduce housing costs. And then another that keeps coming up is right now our code is written as you cannot have two kitchens in a single family home. And could you redo the code so that you could have two kitchens within a single family home? So actually they're not ADUs, but literally you have two kitchens, but you may have an in-law unit within your confines that's not physically separated. And that was what they came up with for fiscal year 21, 22. And they were also looking at balancing what are kind of low-hanging fruit projects that don't take an inordinate amount of time, and those projects that do take more time, and trying to blend them and balance with what a workload would consist of. So we have a pending thing sitting out there, and that's either a housing implementation strategy or a housing production strategy. That'll take some additional coordination with DLCD on both of those. We looked at mandating maximum lot sizes, establishing minimum density standards. Issue that keeps coming up is allowing small and tiny homes. Some of that will be addressed through the middle housing when we look at cottage clusters. Recreational vehicles has come before the council before about living. Right now you're limited to 14 days. Basically it's kind of like a guess, but we know we have individuals in the community who are actually living in the RVs on the side of someone's home. And then the religious institution properties. And so there was some additional law that was passed several years ago. We have some code changes we need to do. We've had conversations with our different faith-based organizations, and it's a complex issue about having housing based upon their tax status, and do you spin property off or not? And, do they own it? Are they selling it? So each pastor that we've had conversations with has a little bit different dynamic. Car camping is another one. So you can throw the tiny homes or recreational vehicles, and the car camping kind of is a bundle of potential activities. Then when we moved out to fiscal year 23-24, the commission was looking at density bonuses. Right now, our provisions in our code only allow you to transfer a portion of the density out of a stream corridor. Should we allow more of that, which then leads to having to change other site design regulations in order to be able to transfer that density? Short-term rentals has been one that has come up on a number of occasions before council. Right now, we're monitoring that. Continue to kind of watch what's going on, but will there be a tipping point where we need to go rewrite and relook at our entire short-term rental provisions? Then substantial completion of utilities at final plat. There was some state law passed on that, but is there more that we could do? Waiving building fees and permit fees, something out in 24-25. And then the commission kind of looked at it as a bundle of things that would be beyond fiscal year 24-25. So you're thinking out fiscal year 25-26, so beyond the 5-year horizon. But that was general obligation bond. That came up as part of the construction excise tax discussion. Housing ombudsman, subsidized work and living spaces, expedited review and permitting, public street standards, and that is, could we narrow our roadways? Lifting the building height restrictions, and that keeps coming up, and I think in part that's going to come up through the middle housing discussion. Not fully as a discrete piece, but through the code audit, we've already identified some potential issues with that. System development charges, deferrals, and loans. Again, we're looking at part of that as part of the CET in one way, and then preservation of the manufactured home parks. So Sue, is EC online with us this evening?
EC is online. It looks like he's muted himself. So there he goes.
And so EC Bell is our chair of our Affordable Housing Commission. So I wanted to provide him a few minutes to be able to share his perspective of the work that he and the commission have done to put together this proposal for you.
Thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak to you. It's a privilege to work with Doug and the people in the city on these important issues. And I can certainly speak to broad ideas of why we've prioritized the way we have in consultation with city officials, and certainly felt like the priority of generating funds to encourage affordable housing in our community was a priority. And so we've stayed with the construction excise tax as a movement, something we want to move forward in the near term, even though with COVID, there's probably never a good time to launch a construction excise tax, but I can understand the stresses. But given the realities of housing and the low profit margins on building affordable housing, usually we need some funds to help encourage our developers and to cover some of their expenses. And so we certainly want to continue to prioritize and encourage the CET. The rest of them, I think Doug's laid out pretty well. Happy to answer any questions, though, that the council might have for clarification.
Questions, anyone? Remember,
Mr. Mayor,
raise your hand.
may I just
Sorry,
kind of
Doug.
finish up just a moment here, kind of maybe set the stage for some questions. So as we put in your RCA, is what staff is looking for is feedback from the council about these timelines and this kind of priority. Is there something you might shift or you might adjust or move that is a variation from what the commission has presented? And keeping in mind, as I mentioned earlier, is, what gives the biggest bang? And so the commission did, I think, a yeoman's job of kind of working through all of that, did the heavy lifting, as all the commissions and committees often do, to kind of come up with what they thought was the biggest bang that's out there. The hope would be, getting some consensus. We're not asking you to vote. We're not asking for a motion. The consensus, if you agree, this work program or with some adjustments you have would be acceptable, because it would set the stage as we move into budget processes and so forth about where we're going to focus our resources internally to bring back to the budget committee and to the city council. That's it, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Thank you, both of you, EC and Doug, thank you. Thank you so much. All right, folks, questions, anyone? Use the raise hand feature, and I'm watching for raised hands. Am I seeing any raised hands? All right, well, not hearing one, I'll launch one in to start. So I know that there's one that's out, it's out a ways, I guess July or something in 23. Regarding reduced complexity, maintenance requirements, and cost of stormwater treatment. We just had a presentation, last city council meeting about stormwater, and we got that. And I know they're forming a committee to do some technical fixes. Will this committee touch on any of this? Do we know?
It could, Mayor. Karin and I have not sat down. Engineering would be leading that particular work, and Karin and I haven't sat down to talk through what the details may be, but there may be some of that particular program that touches on this priority that's been identified.
Thank you. And I suppose that is the same as that if all of a sudden there's a big move for something on religious institution property that may move in the hierarchy. I guess the question is how flexible is your work plan?
It can be flexible. It's going to get back to staff resources to be able to do it. I would always say this: the direction we go today will change over the coming months as issues pop up, and we need to learn to be flexible and be able to trade. But in doing that, what we would want to do is ensure that we're checking with the Affordable Housing Commission and the council to say, oh, do we want to switch out this priority? We haven't started this one yet, but this one has become more of an issue. Do we trade those? Sometimes there are things that we're going after grant funds for. And so then we kind of get locked in with things. A little bit different flexibility for those things that go through a budget process and we're using general fund.
Thank you. Let's go with Stephanie first.
Thank you. So this looks really great to me. This helps me organize in my head how this looks. And so this is a really good piece of work, and I appreciate it for me that it takes my brain a little bit more time to figure these things out. So I really appreciate this. One of the questions I had, and this is probably my naivete showing, is when we're talking about something that's just like a code change, and I know there's probably unintended consequences with these. So I'm looking at the one where lifting restriction on second kitchens. Is there a reason that we wouldn't do something like that sooner? And again, this might be me just simplifying. That seems like a simple piece of work that maybe we could help with. But I'm curious to know sort of why that looks a little farther down the road than something we could do fairly quickly.
Counselor, I think I can respond to that one. If you go from the line that's purple, the housing solutions, if you look at the items that are in the July of 19 through the June of 21, those things we're already committed to doing those. And so in essence, all of those things that are going on, given where we're at in the department, I'm managing all of those all at the same time. To add another new thing, I don't have any bandwidth. So part of what I shared with the commission is finish up this big body of work that we've got going on. Some things will drop off after the first of the year, March kind of time frame-ish or so, is that what we're looking at is when we get to fiscal year 21-22, which is not that far away, we're almost halfway through the year, is that you've got the kitchens would be part of that fiscal year work program. So it's just trying to balance what we've got. If we add too much on, then something else has got to give. And many of the projects we're working on now, we have grant funds. And so we have timelines for those grants that we have to meet.
Let's see, Bryce?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Doug and EC, thank you and the committee for your good work on this. It is a lot, so I appreciate that. Few questions. One, Doug, you mentioned in passing population going down and that having an effect on things. Can you elaborate more on that? I noted in your report that we have below average level of vacancy. And so I don't know if those two would connect, but can you just elaborate real quick more on what you meant when you talked about population going down?
So what it is in the state of Oregon now, the Portland State University does all the population projections for every city and county within the state.
Yeah.
And so we got our first numbers in 2013. We got new numbers in June of 2020. And so when they did the newest round in their 50-year projection models, which is based upon a cohort methodology, is it showed that from where we were in the 17 version versus the 2020 version, their projection is over a 20-year period, we would have 2,800 fewer new residents. That's due in part to lower birth rates, aging population.
Yeah, I see. That makes sense. So would there be reason to believe then that with the lowering population, I mean, at 28, that's almost 10% of our current city population, that the increased vacancy would have an effect on availability of housing?
I would respond to that families come to Newberg for a variety of reasons. We often hear quality of life. We hear that I can get a home at a more cost-effective price and or rent than I can if I go over the hill and go into the Portland metro area. If you just took those two, that puts pressure. Mm-hmm. And so demand may still be there, but then you got to have a supply to be able to meet that. Mm-hmm. And when we dig into the housing needs analysis, we actually pivoted. And in that document, the policy considerations are to do less detached single family and more multifamily. So in the future, over the next 20-year horizon, we're looking at only doing 60% of our housing stock is detached single family, 8% is attached single family, and I think the balance number is 32% would be multifamily. And so part of that is to address the affordability issue. If you can get the right developers with the right units and the price points, is that based upon the income, households can afford that rent until they can save enough funds to be able to do that down payment. So it is a real policy shift that was considered in 2019.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you. And then my last question, so if I understood what you wrote correctly, it sounds as though the median household income has actually decreased, correct, from early 2000. I think the numbers you gave us was to 2016, so it'd be interesting to see over the last 4 years how that's played out. But am I reading it correctly that the median household income has actually decreased since early 2000s, correct?
That is correct, and that also factors in inflation.
And it factors in inflation. Has anyone brought up, an EC, you might be able to speak to this, has anyone on the committee or commission brought up considering rent control? I don't know what that would look like, if there are multiple reasons why we can't do it. I know Oregon as a state, I believe, is one of the first, if not the first state to issue statewide rent control, reducing the amount that landlords could increase rent by 7%. But what would keep us from considering a rent control that's actually lower and consistent with the income of folks that live in the city?
Council, that question had never come up in the last 5 years. So we never really looked at it. Yes, the legislature did pass some laws that put in some rent control restrictions statewide. But when we went through the housing Newberg group, I do not remember any conversation on that topic coming up, and or as we've worked with the Affordable Housing Commission.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's totally okay. I mean, something that I think would be interesting, again, coming from LA, that was a big thing. It was like, if you can get into like some part of Santa Monica where there's rent control, it could be huge. Because some of us, like me in particular, I remember one year it jumped up like $200, which can be absolutely, killer for some families. So yeah, if we have the ability to consider issuing some sort of city rent control in particular areas, my guess is there are going to be landlords that are not going to be particularly happy with it. That makes sense to me. But if, we can consider something like that, that would help out our residents even more. That might already, to your point, be paying more than 50% of their income. That might be a significant way of helping residents.
All right, other questions, folks? Looking for a hand raise. Okay. All right. Now this may be a leading question, but I'll run the risk. So you've got a list of 43 items, something on that order. So Mr. Rux, in all your professional experience, can you tell me, is there a magic wand? Is there a silver bullet to solve our housing affordability problem?
Simple answer is no.
Okay.
It's
Thank
going to
you.
take a combination of things to occur. Think of it as being in the backstage at the theater, and you're running the curtains, and you need to figure out which lever to pull at any given point in time. Dealing with housing affordability in Oregon is like that person standing back there and raising this set and lowering this curtain all at the same time. But there is not one single thing that's going to solve the problem.
Thank you. And then EC, in discussing the construction excise tax, how did you folks address the concern that by putting an additional fee on housing, you're actually increasing the cost of housing? How did you all justify that?
As a overall percentage of a 30-year note, the average increases were not going to be significant on a monthly mortgage payment. So to be sure, there is some additional cost that the builders will likely pass on to the homeowners. But at the same time, the ability to amass some funds to be used to help with offsetting things like SDCs or other avenues that we could utilize in spending those monies can increase the attractiveness for builders to build those lower percentage profit houses, smaller homes and so on. So the question is, we were looking at how do we make a pool of money to make it somewhat accessible or attractive to builders to build a house where they would make less money in theory on a 1,200 square foot house than they would if they built a 2,400 square foot house on the same lot. So how do we encourage them to build those houses at lower price points? And some of that is going to have to be using some of the increase on one side to reduce the SDCs or other things that bite into their profit margins on smaller homes, since those are the same costs regardless of a 2,500 square foot house or a 1,200 square foot house.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, EC. Thank you and the committee for all your work. And Doug, thank you so
Mr.
much
Mayor.
for the presentation. Okay, Bryce, yep.
Yeah, sorry, EC, were you going to say something? Or was it Doug?
No, sir. I was just asking if that was sufficient for Mr. Mayor. So no, Council, nothing additional.
Okay, wonderful. Sorry, two last questions. One, so all this is really good. the part about renting, because I'm sensing, and I want to make sure I'm wrapping my arms around this, is that we're talking about affordable housing, folks that can purchase homes. We're also wanting to consider rent and something that is affordable for folks that are renting, and then ultimately considering folks who are houseless, right, and what it means to address some of the needs there. The idea being that we can move people right along that spectrum. So along those lines, as it pertains to renting, do we currently have policies or plans in place that reserve that particular rental units or availability for families whose medium household income, is below a particular point?
At the city level, no, we do not.
Is that
The
something
state adopted a statute to allow inclusionary zoning provisions, which would permit a local jurisdiction to say X number of units within a development would have to be at 80% or less of the median family income. But in my discussions with colleagues around the state, they have concerns with the way that statute is written and if it's really workable or not.
I see. And not that we have to do this now, but I would be curious to know what those concerns are. I mean, if we know that a vast majority of our residents are paying over 50%, and it seems as though the trend is that household incomes are going down. Like off the top of my head, that seems like it could be something that helps address some of these needs. But I trust you and your colleagues. I feel like there are significant concerns for X, Y, and Z reasons. It would be interesting to hear what some of those specific concerns are. The other question, is thinking more about houselessness. So it looks like a number of the proposed things are really good around, again, rent and developing affordable housing for folks that are buying, whether it's multiple family duplexes, all that's good. Of the initiatives on this graph, which again, 42 is a whole lot, which ones, in your opinion, particularly allow for alleviating our houseless population here in Newberg?
I would say that if we were looking at those provisions that are dealing with the tiny homes and the recreational vehicles and the car camping, would be those that would be addressing situations where you're going from people from houselessness to getting a roof over their head, that transition, that first stage of transitional, to maybe a transitional facility that has monitoring and support services, wraparound services that then can graduate to living in an independent unit, maybe a one-bedroom apartment. So between the Housing Solutions Group, the Affordable Housing Commission, and conversations with some community members, we've kind of, I'm not saying that's the right, I'm not using the right words, but that's kind of the progression that has been discussed.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's phenomenal. Actually, I attended a session at the virtual LC meeting a few weeks back with some cities that are doing some dope stuff, sounds similar to what you all are planning. So to answer your question around direction of what timelines might be helpful to move up, that would be one that to me seems like could be significant. If right now we're not anticipating it until fiscal year 22-23 to directly sort of push initiatives affecting houselessness, that might be one to consider moving up, knowing that we do have a houseless population here who could directly benefit from those initiatives being moved up in the timeline. Obviously take into account, like you said, your margin in capacity, because I know you all are out here grinding real hard. But that would be my initial thought and recommendation. Thank you.
All right, anything?
Well,
sorry.
I was going to say, Mayor, following up with the councilor's recent comment, is if you were looking or considering moving the tiny homes, recreational vehicles, and car camping up to 21, 22, it may be then taking the affordable multifamily housing property tax might be one that moves 1 year out further in time. Just thinking about kind of what would be involved in taking three items, bundling them together, and the work that would be involved versus one of the other three that are identified. Sharing utility lines, that's a conversation we really have to have with our engineering department to see how that would work. But that, Counselor, that would be kind of the shifting that might occur.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Not just trying to, you can't just add more without either getting more hands or shifting something off. So that makes sense. And I'm open, to other counselors or folks giving feedback. That was just my initial thought. And, I defer to the wisdom of folks in the council.
Yeah, one other thing is there are a fair number of conversations going on now about trying to do something in the way of transitional housing, particularly, which we sorely lack in this community. So some more sort of transitional housing. But, again, the other thought is, I know, and Doug could certainly corroborate this, but if there's a private interest in the community that's really trying to push something forward, and if they can do some of the work to take it off staff's plate, that can be helpful too. So I think, anyway, hopefully, Doug, that would be helpful.
And we've had some conversations, some of our faith-based, would like to advance forward housing on religious institution properties. And so, yeah, if there are groups out there who want to take a first cut at some code language and so forth, and then bring it to staff, and then we worked with the Affordable Housing Commission, that's another way to advance some things where the community is fully then invested in trying to solve that particular issue.
So, Doug, just one other thing. So, we've got the council goal. We've got 42 items and 43 maybe now. But does the housing needs assessment, does that give you baseline data in terms of how many current affordable units we have, how many manufactured homes, all that kind of thing? Can we get that easily?
Yes, that information is in the housing needs analysis, and in the update we're doing, we're not touching all of that. We're only dealing with the buildable lands inventory and the population portion.
Okay.
Because we're basically, we were just 1 year out of sequence.
Right. Because at some point, we're going to have to evaluate the goals that we've set and what we're trying to do. And, and I think this will probably come up. I think Denise and I talked about this a little bit, that if we're going to put in, if a construction excise tax is on the table, in a certain number of years, we're going to want to know, did it do anything? Has any of this stuff done anything? You know what I mean? And that will be the evaluation. Now, granted, that doesn't happen in a bubble, but at some point,
That's where in any program's always valuable to have the metrics to measure to see what you're doing.
Right.
Are you meeting your goals and your objectives?
And again, if there's something that's on the books that isn't working, even if it was something that this council put in place, if it isn't doing it, move it along, get it out of there. At least that's my opinion. So, all right. Anything else, guys? Any other questions or comments? I just got to say this, Doug. I don't know how many communities have a list of this many items for affordable housing. I can't, and the attention that it's gotten here in Newberg, now I know we all think it moves way too slowly, but nonetheless, is, I think, pretty amazing. You're right on it, and I can't thank you enough. And ECU and the rest of the folks as well. Thank you for all of your effort in this area. So thank you. All right. Anything else? We've got a couple ticks. Anything else you guys want to do before? I don't know, Dan, do you want to give a city manager's report, or do you want to wait for the business session?
It's up to you. I can probably go quickly.
Yeah. You want to do that, folks? We okay? Go. Yeah. Okay. We got.
Do it. Okay. We got direction, clear direction on the chat.
Yeah.
So this will be brief, both because I know we've got a packed agenda and because there's a lot of things in flux and in process. Just wanted to highlight the fact that I think in the participants is Kezia Warner, who is a little over a week now under her belt. She keeps coming back, and I want to say thank you for that. And she's, as you all probably know, our assistant city manager. And so just to give a quick sort of synopsis of the fire hose that she's drinking from, really just trying to get her arms around what we do in HR, from Allison, who we're really lucky to have stay with us and has been the interim since January. And then Kezia is meeting with a lot of the department heads and understanding our business lines and what other department managers are working on and priorities and all those things. So welcome to her. Also, just wanted to highlight the fact that as I continue to get multiple political calls, as you might, that we have an election coming up. And so just a reminder, it doesn't, it doesn't take a lot to drop off your ballot. There are 3 locations in Newberg: Jaquith Park on the west side, the Portland Community College campus, and the Public Safety Building. Want to also highlight the fact that given the national level conversations and concerns that I think are being expressed by a lot of folks out there around election night or election week, as it may be, since I think we're not 100% sure when we'll have actual results on the national level races, that our police have sort of stepped up a level of vigilance around some messaging that might be out there, and just trying to make sure that we assure a level of safety for folks to actually participate in the process, to feel safe in Newberg, and really be able to exercise their right to vote. And so want to encourage everyone to vote, vote once, but vote and participate. We are trying to encourage, as we always have, a community that is respectful, to assure that people are allowed to vote without any other any other sort of speech out there, as far as folks that might feel intimidated and those kinds of things, or actions. So trying to make sure that we vote peacefully and make sure that we continue to live in a safe community. Just wanted to talk briefly, very briefly, because I'm looking at the clock, on something that I've talked a couple times with various counselors on. And it's something I guess I've been thinking about in my own world. And I realize over the weekend that I haven't necessarily always been completely forthright with my plans. And that's one of those things that, I'm thinking about how to be a good leader, and making sure that others know where we're going and why we're going there. And so I just wanted to maybe start to share some of that more publicly and include others in the thought process. Crazy thought. And so one of the things that we've been doing in the 8 months or so that I've been with the city is really trying to take the council goals, the community vision, and implement and really just get things done. Obviously, we've had to deal with COVID, as everyone has, and trying to pivot where we can to make sure that we're making sure the community's safe. But I'm working under, I think, at least for now, what I would call 4 priorities. 1, communication and feedback. So making sure that we are seeking honest feedback from folks, authentic feedback from folks, that we're also doing it authentically, so that we're actually listening and trying to get better and improve as an organization. And we're doing that through surveys, which there are a couple out there for various audiences about how they get information from the city and about things in the community. We're doing it in a way that will hopefully expose us a little bit to what may be negative feedback, but negative feedback's a way for us to grow. And so we're trying to basically start down the path of improvement by hearing from all members of the community. Another thing we're trying to work on is transparency. And one of the efforts that we've got going on is a change to our budgeting process that hopefully will add a little bit more clarity for folks as to what the city spends its money on and its time on, which should focus more on programs and what you get for your money, in essence. And so that is forthcoming. Our staff has started down the path on that program-based approach, and I'm hopeful that it'll be a really good tool for having better conversations with people about what the city business is and how to improve it. The other, or the next one in my mind, is planning. And so I don't necessarily mean that in the Doug urban planning sense, but in the general short, not that nothing wrong with Doug, but just in the short range needs through long range planning, right? So we got to meet our needs in the immediate term by planning for the long haul. And it's one of the things that we've been starting to talk about, trying to think about after COVID might be like, or what needs in various departments are. I've talked to our department heads about being split-eyed, so immediate needs and long-range vision. And, so that we're working hard to adapt and encourage the voices of our staff members as well, and what we need to do, and doing it in a consistent way. So I'm familiar with the Plan, Do, Check, Act, but there are a lot of frameworks out there that we can cyclically kind of, build a better mousetrap by just testing it. And the last one is process. So, trying to be more consistent, the approach to the work that people can have a better feeling for what we are trying to accomplish, because we'll tell them. And also because they can give us feedback, and also because we're trying to iterate the way that we do it in a way that's consistent, so that you can predict what you're going to have as far as service from the community, from the city to the community. And so, just want to kind of share that. I think it's always helpful, or it can be helpful to sort of know what we're trying to do, and then hopefully folks can pile on and help us get there. So that is my report.
Any questions for Dan, folks? No? All righty, awesome. Seeing none. Dan, thank you so much. All right, I've got 6:57. Let's go to 7:10 for the restart for the business session. So 7:10, we'll see you back. Stop your video, mute your phones, but don't leave. And we'll see you back at 7:10. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So let's, it's 7:10 by my count. So let's call to order the City Council business session for November 2nd, 2020. Hello, Lincoln. Glad to hear from you. All right, a roll call, please, Sue.
Councillor Cofield,
What up? What up? I'm here.
Councillor Bacon,
Here.
Councillor Findlay,
Here.
Councillor Yarnell Holloman. Here. And Mayor Rogers.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Martinez Plancarte is absent this evening, and the District 5 seat is vacant at this time.
Right. It should be noted that Elise Yarnell Holloman was here during the work session as well. So, all right. Moving right along. The Pledge of Allegiance, please. All right. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So for those who were not listening in on the work session, we did hear from the city manager and the city manager's report. I'm sure that will be posted online as well, which is another source. Public comments, Sue, I understand we do not have any general public comments this evening.
That is correct.
All righty, thank you. Then I will close the public comment testimony. Anything with issue tracker, Dan?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to public hearings. This is one of a few that we've got this evening. One reminder this evening, 8:30, we will be moving into an executive session. So some of the items may be pushed on a couple weeks out, depending on how we get through. So not to hurry you, there's no hurry, but we'll keep an eye on 8:30. All right, first public hearing, number 6A, ordinance 2020-2868. And let's see, where's my cheat sheet? Sue, where's my cheat sheet?
Mr. Mayor, I believe that we reordered the hearings and we were doing the CET first.
No,
No.
I think we're going to do this
Okay.
one first. I think.
Okay.
I still see that. Yeah, we're going to switch the other. We'll switch we're going to switch this evening, folks, 6B and 6C. 6C will go before 6B.
Okay.
Okay, and 6A is still in order. So,
Mr. Mayor, I don't know where your hearing script is. Do you want me
I got it.
to
I found
pull
it.
it up? Okay.
Found it. Thank you. All right, here it is. Followed by script, folks. All right, the meeting is now, this legislative hearing is now called to order. So the purpose is, as mentioned, ordinance 2020-2868, an ordinance amending the Newberg Comprehensive Plan and Map and Newberg Municipal Code, Title 15, Development Code 15.05.110, adoption of zoning map 15.300 through 15.500 for regulations related to the Riverfront Master Plan, Appendix A and Appendix B. All right, anyone, declaration of conflict of interest or abstentions on this one? Denise?
I have a possible conflict of interest. I live in that zone.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, seeing none. All right, moving on. Mr. Rux, the staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Doug Rux, Community Development Director. So as the mayor's read what the title of tonight's legislative hearing is, and it's related to implementation of the Riverfront Master Plan. As we always do, I'd like to enter the staff report, all of the attachments and the exhibits into the official record. We have with us this evening Frank Angelo and Kara Haggart from Angelo Planning Group. They've been assisting us from back when we put together the master plan, and they are working as a sub-consultant on this project to help us do the implementation. So I'm gonna kind of turn this over to Frank and Kara to walk through. We do have a slide presentation to get through. They're gonna go through most of the slides, and then I'm going to kind of jump in when we get to the findings portion and finish this up. So Frank, Kara, it's yours.
And you're gonna pull up the PowerPoint, right? There we go. Good. Well, good evening. I'm Frank, as Doug mentioned. I'm Frank Angelo, the Angelo Planning Group. It's been our pleasure to work with the city and the community over the past couple of years on the Riverfront Master Plan. And it's now at a point where it will be, the steps taken tonight will lead to the implementation of the plan itself. Next slide, please. Thank you. It was a little over a year ago that the Riverfront Master Plan was accepted by the Newberg City Council. At that point, the plan was accepted by the council, and it included a number of action items to follow on to implement the elements of the Riverfront Master Plan. In the summer, in July, this July, we held a joint City Council Planning Commission work session with the first draft of the amendments to the comprehensive plan and the community development code, as well as some other implementation methods to implement the findings and the recommendations of the plan. We received a few comments at that work session and went back and made some revisions to the text and the amendments, and public notice was sent out the first week in September for the adoption of the amendments. At the same time, in early September, an online survey and an interactive map were uploaded and online at the city's website. The online survey was available from September 2nd to September 24th and offered citizens the opportunity to look at the plan itself and provide comments to the city on the plan recommendations. Next slide, please. So again, the online survey was pulled off of the website. The interactive map, however, is still live on the city's website. So residents can go into the website and look at their specific properties, see what their current zoning is and current comprehensive plan designations are, and look at what the proposed comp plan and zoning designations are. During the roughly 2-week period the online survey was on, we had 174 views and 4 responses with questions or comments to the city itself. The interactive map is still live, so residents do have that opportunity to check and look at the outcomes and the results of the Riverfront Master Plan. Next slide, please. So on October 8th, we held a public hearing with the Planning Commission with the revised an updated comprehensive plan, development code, and implementing ordinances that reflected the amendments, the recommendations we heard at the July joint work session. The Riverfront Master Plan itself included 6 implementation steps. What is before you tonight, the changes to the comp plan, development code, and the implementing ordinances. As well, the Riverfront Master Plan includes future recommendations for infrastructure improvements within the planning area, identifies development community projects that are important to create the design and the climate for investment within the area, suggest actions to be taken and partnerships to be formed to implement and move forward with the recommendations of the plan, identify sources of funding for improvements within the area, and includes a time frame for initiating the key actions and the projects recommended in the plan, and their short-term recommendations, midterm recommendations, and long-term recommendations. Tonight, as we mentioned and Doug mentioned, that before you are the amendments to the comprehensive plan, the development code, and the implementing ordinances to implement the elements of the Riverfront master plan. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kara Haggart with APG to step through the recommended amendments to these documents. You've seen many of these already, but they are in the final form tonight. Kara?
Thank you, Frank. And could you go to the next slide, please? Great. So I'm not going to read all of these to you because you have seen them before at our joint work session, but I do want to highlight that since we last met way back in July, we've made a couple minor revisions. So to the description for the mixed use plan designation, and that's actually amendment number 11. If you could go to the next slide. Great, thank you. So we made one amendment to slide number 11 to reflect the feedback that we received at the joint work session with Planning Commission. And that was to just clarify that convenience retail is actually not permitted in the mixed employment designation, which is in the mixed use category. Next slide, please. So here is the map of the proposed land use designations. That includes the new mixed employment area west of the former mill site. And you can see the continuous area of park property along the river, lots of new land for medium and some higher density housing. So these are kind of the major changes, and then a couple just minor correction areas. And next slide, please. And again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I do want to highlight that since the July work session, we revised amendment number 2, which is the Riverfront Overlay Subdistrict Code. And we did that to clarify the cap on floor area for commercial and office developments within the mixed employment zone. And that was in response to a comment that we received at the meeting. And then our following meeting with Planning Commission, they recommended a minor change to the design standards for both commercial and mixed employment developments to ensure that building materials are consistent for all sides of a building with primary or secondary entrances, not including loading zones. So that change has been reflected in your amendments tonight. Next slide, please. And so here is the proposed zoning for the riverfront area. And I'll just note that a lot of this area isn't actually within the city limits yet. So this map is actually just reflecting what the zoning would look like once the area is annexed and zoning is applied. And with that, I will be turning it back over to Doug.
Thank you, Kara. So next slide, Sue. So as we have to do through the land use planning process, we had to evaluate this particular proposal against the statewide planning goals. So what's in your packet is a detailed evaluation of how this particular proposal complies with the statewide planning goals. I will take a moment to note that we did get a response from the Fair Housing Council. Their initial inquiry was asking to do a little more robust analysis on goal 10 on housing. So we did that, and we sent that back to the Fair Housing Council, and on the file that we got, the file extension gave us a gold star for the thoroughness with which we went through that analysis. And what the Riverfront Plan does is it actually increases the capacity for residential housing within the 460 acre area by 70 housing units. And that's changing some medium density to mixed employment and industrial, but then changing some commercial land to high density and to medium density. We also did the evaluation against our comprehensive plan goals and policies, and that is included in your packet. And we concluded both for statewide planning goals and for our local comprehensive planning goals is that we are in compliance. The final piece of that is we have to do an evaluation on our land use processes and procedures and the districts and their amendments. And so we've done an evaluation that is included in your packet and have concluded that we comply with that. Kira mentioned a couple of the changes that came about from our joint work session and from the Planning Commission. I do also need to note that in my oversight, I forgot one table in 15305, and it's really a table addressing marijuana uses within our overlay districts. Planning Commission did not see that particular change, but it is included in your final packet this evening. And that's just to ensure that those marijuana related facilities are 1,000 feet away from parks. And as you saw in the previous slide, there is a big proposed park area down along the riverfront. So next slide, please. So for the Planning Commission, they held their hearing last month. And so this is their recommendation. And that is that City Council adopt the ordinance approving CPTA 20-0001, CPMA 20-0002, DCA 20-0001, and ZMA, which is the zoning amendment portion, for as case number 20-0002. Next slide, please. So the next steps after this particular hearing is we will continue to work with property owners that are currently within the riverfront area, but outside of the city limits, but within the urban growth boundary. We are in discussions with a variety of property owners, which includes the Oregon Department of Transportation, about annexing those properties. That would be a future action that would be brought forward to the Planning Commission and to the City Council. And as we noted earlier in the presentation, we will continue to put information up on the website about the implementation steps for the Riverfront Master Plan. I do have one item of note from a public comment, and that is from the new mill owner. That is from Commercial Development Company. A conversation I had with them this morning is that they're asking the council to not do both readings this evening, just do the first reading, hold over the second reading until November 16th, which would allow some time for CDC and myself and city manager to have some conversations with them about the Riverfront Master Plan and the implementation. They shared with me that it's not that they have any big issues, they just want to better understand the entirety of the plan first before it gets adopted. Next slide, Sue. And that turns it back over to the mayor for questions.
All righty, Doug, thank you. Kira, thank you so much. And Frank, thank you. Thank you very much for all of your work on this. All right, folks, let's see. Let me start with public testimony, Sue. Do we have anything, as is our custom here? If there are comments, it's limited to 5 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I do not have anyone signed up for public comment on this item tonight.
Okay, and no one on the line as well?
No one on the line.
Okay, then I will close public testimony. All right, the recommendation from staff, please.
Doug.
Doug, you're muted.
You're muted.
Yeah. Thank you. Staff's recommendations to adopt ordinance number 2020-2868, but to continue the second reading to November 16th.
All right, any questions from staff, for staff? I am seeing none. I'm seeing no hands going up. All right, council deliberation. Or a motion would work as well. Stephanie's reaching. I see Stephanie.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to move that we adopt ordinance number 2020-2868 and not waive the second reading.
All right, thank you. And do we have a second? Okay. It looks like
Second.
Bryce is signaling for a second. All right. All right, folks, any further discussion? Okay, so at this point, we will wait to the second reading, which will be November 16th, correct? And you will bring it back to us, Doug?
That is correct.
Okay, well then in that case, thank you all very much. We will see you back again on November 16th. Again, thank you for all of your hard work on this. And I'll tell you what, this Riverfront Master Plan is going to be pretty awesome once things start happening. So thank you all so very much. All right, moving on. Now we've changed the agenda around, as we mentioned earlier. We're going now to item 6C. This is a public hearing, a legislative public hearing. Ordinance 2020-2860, an ordinance establishing a construction excise tax and creating chapter 3.60 in the Newberg Municipal Code. Let us call this legislative hearing to order. And a declaration of conflict of interest or abstentions, people. All right, I have a potential conflict of interest because my day job involves the development of affordable housing through Habitat for Humanity. All right, next, the staff report, please. Doug, it looks like it's all Doug all the time tonight, actually.
I'm not sure if that's
Oh, Doug,
necessarily.
Bryce, excuse me, Bryce may have a conflict, sorry.
You're good. Yeah, real quick. So I work at George Fox University. Potential conflict of interest. I'm not directly involved in any capital projects, but as an employee of the university, that might and probably will be building in the future, that does have some sort of ripple effect for me as well.
All right, anyone else? Okay, Doug, I think that is now your cue.
I was going to say, Mayor, I'm not sure that it's good that it's me all the time. So we got to get some more people in here. So as the mayor indicated, this is a legislative hearing. We actually opened this hearing at your previous meeting in October, continued it tonight. We took some testimony at your meeting on October 19th. So tonight I'm going to give you a little bit more detailed of a staff report than what I gave you at your last meeting. So this goes back to December of 2018 and the housing Newberg proposals that were generated that came before the city council. And one of the elements that was included in that was consideration of an evaluation of a construction excise tax. There were 3 other proposals. That was the annexations of R3 accessory dwelling units and the missing middle housing. We've completed the annexations and accessory dwellings, and we're working on the construction excise and the missing middle housing. As noted in your work session, we were talking about the housing program overall. We have 42 identified items, and from that work session, I think we now have 43. Thank you, Councilor Cofield, for adding a new one. The construction excise tax came out of the 2016 legislative session as Senate Bill 1533. It's an opt-in. All communities do not have to do it, but if you choose to consider evaluating having a construction excise tax program, there are state law provisions in place that you must follow. We began this discussion back in January of 2019 with the Affordable Housing Commission. As noted in your report, they met in April, May, July, and October of 2019, working through the proposal. They evaluated programs that were already in place in other communities. That list is within your packet this evening. There's probably 2 key elements that come out of the construction excise tax, and because sometimes individuals get confused, and it applies to new residential construction. Some people thought, oh, if I'm doing a mechanical or, getting a new hot water heater, I would have to pay a construction excise tax. No, it would only apply if you're building a new residential unit. The other provision is that you can also apply a construction excise tax on commercial and industrial and mixed use development. Residential has a cap of 1%. The commercial, industrial, residential does not. There are specific exemptions in the state law. There are 7 of those. Those are listed in your staff report. And in the Affordable Housing Commission's evaluation and looking at other communities, there were some additional exemptions that they identified. And that's included in the ordinance in your packet this evening. We did outreach to the development community as we were working through this particular program. I've listed those that we talked to and got feedback. That feedback is rolled up and it's in your packet as an attachment as well. It was a variety of comments and feedback, and that's an attachment 4. Questions came up about revenue generation and what that might be. So we ran that. So we pulled examples of residential single-family permit development and looking at the permit value, not the sale value, the real market value, but it's based upon the permit value. and predicting that we are projecting that we would do 100 homes that could generate roughly $300,000 a year in revenue for the construction excise tax program. We've had conversations with the Portland Home Builders Association. So Ezra Hammer and I have talked on a number of occasions. There were two things that he brought to the table. One was looking at vesting system development charges. At the time you did your land use application submittal, the Affordable Housing Commission discussed that in detail, and finally at the end concluded that locking the SDC rates at that time of land use application submittal was not in the best interest of the city. The second issue was adjusting the timing on SDCs and when those are paid. Currently, SDCs are required to be paid at the time you are issued your building permit. We talked about that internally at staff level. We talked with the Affordable Housing Commission, and we found a point at the time of insulation inspection. So when you would call for your insulation inspection, that would be the time that you would have to pay your city SDCs. We've also communicated with CPRD, and they were okay with delaying collecting their SDCs until the time the city collects theirs. We still have an outstanding issue based on comments that were received at our October hearing about installment payments and interpretation of state law, and I still need to get some legal opinions and advice back on that one. That could affect when the school district's construction excise tax is paid, as well as the cities. So that's one unresolved issue. I should note that in April of this year with COVID-19, we did come back to the city council and suggested delaying holding the hearings on this until the fall of 2020. And so we are now in the fall of 2020. We were back in front of you in October for that first hearing to occur. Based upon the proposal and the recommendation from the Affordable Housing Commission, internally between the legal department, finance department, and community development, we did do a little bit of fine tuning of the Affordable Housing Commission proposal. And I did that, and it's included as a track changes version in your packet. So you can see where those minor adjustments, some of it was just sequencing and organizing, some of it was wordsmithing to make sure things were clear. There have been a variety of public comments that have come in, some before your hearing in October, some at the hearing in October, and then there were some additional comments that were submitted as well. One of those was addressing the issue of the timing of paying the construction excise tax, and as I noted, I need to address and get some legal opinion on that one. So we'll be looking for this to be a two-step process, take testimony this evening, and then come back on November 16th. There were some other suggestions that were made at the last hearing that were valid, and we did some adjustments to that, and there's a track changes version as attachment 11 in your packet that shows those minor adjustments that we did. We received some comments from Robert Suppy. I provided a response to those in your packet. I think the most notable of that is how do we ensure that the units stay affordable? And the response to that is that with this program, and if there was a partnership with a developer, there's a contract that would occur between the city and the developer on awarding funds to help provide affordable units. And that there would be language written into that particular contract that if a property went up for sale, they would have to notify the city, and then we'd have to look at what that sales price was and if it was still going to meet the affordability provisions or not. There are elements within the proposed ordinance that if you sold and it was outside, that you would have to pay back the construction excise tax funds, and that would go back into the pool. We also received comments from Merrill Kunkel, Jesse Nemick, and Charlie Harris. And then I know Sue received some additional comments today. The Affordable Housing Commission is recommending that the City Council adopt ordinance number 2020-2860. I think I've missed a number in this. 2860. And I think, and that's included as attachment 8 in your particular packet. I think I will stop there, Mayor, and turn it back over to you.
All right, Doug, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, let's go. Doug relayed some of the public testimony that was included in your packet. I think there's a total of 11 pages or something along those lines. And then I think we've got some other folks on the line. I believe, Sue. Why don't we start with I guess opponents? Why don't we start with Ezra Hammer if Ezra is on the line?
Okay.
Thank you.
Ezra?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Mayor, and good evening, City Council. Can you hear me all right? Awesome. I'm
Yes.
seeing some head
Yes,
waving.
we can.
Wonderful. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you tonight. Thank you, Sue. So I've submitted multiple letters on the record, and so I don't want to kind of rehash all of that tonight. I think, Mayor, you touched on something earlier that was really worthwhile. And so I want to highlight 3 recommendations that we have that we believe are fair and reasonable given the increased cost to housing that the construction excise tax will have. The first is the consideration of the following ordinance that Doug has mentioned and worked diligently on to allow for the payment of system development charges later on in the construction process. Importantly, system development charges are there to mitigate the impacts associated with families living in housing. And so we believe that collecting those fees closer to the point that the families live in that housing is most appropriate. And thank you, Doug, for working on that. I know you are an intrepid team of one, and you are much appreciated. The second is to delay the implementation of the fee until the city and the county exit their states of emergency. As you highlighted, as Doug highlighted in his comments, this was an ordinance that was delayed previously. And as I highlighted in my previous communication to you, new construction starts are down approximately 50% through much of the greater Portland metropolitan region. The housing industry, like many during the COVID crisis, have faced serious headwinds, most notably associated with financing. And so a number of apartments, homes, condominiums, and accessory dwelling units have fallen out of the construction process because of inability to finance. So we're asking for the city to recognize those headwinds and to support the development community with an implementation date after the city and the county exit the current crisis. The third and final recommendation, I think, is one that you touched on earlier, Mayor, and that really is putting in place a sunset clause so that you can come back in 4 or 5 years, look at all of the dollars that have been collected, look at how those dollars have been spent, and determine if this is in fact a fair balancing of the equities. Given the increased cost to housing that you will see associated with the CET, we want to make sure that there is a commensurate benefit that is in fact realized for the community. And so we are asking for you to consider a sunset clause that will allow the city council to reconsider this ordinance in 4 or 5 years and determine at that time if this is a program that they want to continue or perhaps let expire. Mayor, I think those are my points, and thank you all for hearing me out tonight.
Thank you, Ezra. Thank you for your time. Sue, and I think you had a letter that you wanted to read into the record from Philip Higgins, I believe.
Yes, so I have one more opponent, and then we have a proponent, Lisa Rogers, who's
Right.
also waiting to speak. So I'll give this my best shot to get it done in 5 minutes. So this is from Philip Higgins, who is a local realtor. Councilors, thank you for taking the time to thoughtfully consider the CET. As a citizen, a small business owner, and an advocate for a robust Newberg economy, I appreciate the council's willingness to be reflective on weighty and far-reaching matters. Some additional food for thought on top of my previous letter. A construction excise tax affects residential construction much differently than the same tax on commercial and industrial. Residential home builders pass through expenses to the eventual end user. Obviously, this puts upward pricing pressure on the homes subject to the CET. While we have an affordability crisis, no one is presuming new construction is the affordable housing solution, so it makes sense to tax it and spread the money elsewhere. A small population paying a targeted tax they can likely afford. While I disagree with the fairness of saddling a very small section of the population with a tax designed to fix a problem we should all be addressing, this is an easy theory to digest. To be aware, the CET will also eventually affect the resale market as residential realtors run comparables and sales by square foot. The addition of the CET will filter into the entirety of the pricing math. It will not be immediate, but will eventually occur. All homes will be more expensive as a result, yet the CET will only extract a benefit from a small percentage of new construction projects for the intended end use. More highly problematic to our economic health is the CET on commercial and industrial properties. Commercial real estate exists in two distinct categories, leased and owner user. Most commercial real estate that's left to be built here in Newberg is owner user. Speculative projects, ones looking for tenants, are unlike residential, unable to as easily pass through the associated the increased cost because the rental lease market in CRE is not, especially in Yamhill County, as fluid and adaptable to expense increases. While the CET may not be the reason a speculative project gets built, it certainly adds a cut to Newberg's and CPRD's existing death by 1,000 cuts. Fee structure, a structure that has to get past the bank's underwriters for a project to get built. CRE does not have the same luxury as residential construction to pass this through to the end user, so the tipping point of costs the project can absorb are much different and much lower. Owner users choosing to build here in Newberg and bring short and long-term jobs will have to absorb the CET directly into their budget. Given the cost size of industrial projects today, this translates directly into less capital available to hire employees. Why consider a municipality for relocation when you cannot execute on your reason for relocating to add capacity and grow? We desperately need small and large industrial space to be built. Businesses here in Newberg are unable to grow and add capacity and employ simply because we do not have the space. I will not bore you with the multiple stories I have of small business owners waiting months to years for space to open up, or the stories of business owners who had to give up on Newberg and relocate to other municipalities because we have limited space and existing high barriers to build more. While we are working on adding more land to our industrial deficiency, we must be wary of adding cost barriers to our existing land inventory. While it's tempting to think the West Rock site will be the spark that ignites Newberg's return to manufacturing glory, that optimism is overblown in contrast with today's economic reality. We must first and foremost incentivize CRE development on our existing land base, not decentivize. Please also consider the heroic efforts of our partners like SEDCOR, our citizen volunteers on economic development committees, and even a newly created city position, all working at bringing new businesses to Newberg and helping existing ones stay and grow in our city. Real money is being spent in countless hours in the pursuit of recruiting trade sector business and to support small business growth. Given Newberg's long historical struggle with being business friendly, why are we even considering hamstringing those efforts? Thank you again for taking the time to consider all these factors in your decision. Sincerely, Philip E. Higgins.
All right, Sue, thank you. Well done. Sounds like you used to work on a radio station.
I
All right.
did. Cheers.
Yeah.
Now we have, are you ready for the proponent?
Proponent, let's hear the proponent.
Okay. Lisa?
Thank you, Sue. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Councilors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my testimony. My name is Lisa Rogers, and I'm a longtime developer of affordable housing. I work for CASA of Oregon, a statewide nonprofit housing development consultant agency, and I'm here to urge you to support the implementation of a construction excise tax on all new development in Newberg. The city of Newberg is considered a severely rent-burdened community. That means more than 25% of the population pays more than 50% of their income toward their housing costs. The norm is that the people are expected to pay 30% of their income towards housing costs. Obviously, Newberg is in need of more affordable housing. The city, fortunately, has been working on tackling the affordable housing issue for over 15 years. You've created committees to address possible solutions to the lack of affordable housing in Newberg. Some of those tools these committees created include SDC waivers for affordable housing, established a housing trust fund, increase density limits, smaller lot sizes, reducing requirements to develop ADUs on your property, i.e. like no parking requirements, allows for a second kitchen, etc. And then fees in lieu of parking, and the requirement of including R3 when annexing large parcels into the UGB. This is a great testament to the city's awareness of your community needs and the efforts you have enacted to continue to allow all peoples the opportunity to live here. In 2016, the state of Oregon passed Senate Bill 1533, which allows cities and counties to impose a construction excise tax to support the development of affordable housing. This is yet another tool to make housing more affordable here in Newberg. The tax is a 1% fee on the permit valuation of the proposed development. Opponents of the CET would have you believe that this tax will keep developers from building in Newberg. However, a closer look at how the proceeds of the tax are used show that 4% of the tax can be held by the city or county for administrative purposes, and the balance of the tax goes to 50% in developer incentives, SDC waivers, that type of thing, 15% to Oregon Housing and Community Services for down payment assistance, and 35% to affordable housing projects. Using this calculation, for every dollar developer is charged for the CET, they get back 48 cents in incentives. As well, on a $500,000 home, assuming the developer is passing on this fee, homeowners would only pay an additional $17 a month to cover the cost of the tax. Note, someone who can afford a $500,000 home, who is only paying 30% of their income toward their housing costs, would have to have income of 122% of the area median income, or $112,362 in annual earnings. Newberg is considered part of the Portland Metropolitan Statistical Area. A family of 4 has a median income of $92,100. That same family at 80% of the area median has an income of $73,680. If they pay 30% of their income to their housing costs, they could afford a home of approximately $335,000. And in my written stuff, I had an actual calculation of how you would get there, but I won't bore you with that. A gentleman from Crestview Crossing Project at the last city council meeting said that they would not live up to their promise of providing 12 units of affordable housing in their development if the CET were enacted. That seems a bit disingenuous. A 1% construction tax on a home with a permit of $350,000, which doesn't include the land value, so the total cost of the home would probably be closer to $500,000. For 100 homes is $350,000. If the developer has 12 of the 100 units designated as affordable housing, the SDC waiver for those homes at $30,000 per home means the developer would receive $360,000 in waived SDCs, which is $10,000 more than the CET being charged. Even if all 12 units do not receive SDC waivers, the developer will receive approximately $168,000 in incentives from the tax, so the impact is pretty minimal. According to Zillow, the average home cost in Newberg is $415,213 as of November 1st, 2020, which shows that housing costs are greater than what many of our residents can afford. The CET will help our residents close that gap by providing resources to make homes more affordable in Newberg. My recommendations are for you to approve a construction excise tax on all new developments immediately, and do not charge a CET on affordable units. Thank you for your time and consideration.
All right, Ms. Rogers, thank you. Any other public testimony, Sue?
No, sir.
Okay, then I will close the public testimony portion.
Mr. Mayor,
Doug,
one piece is just
Yeah.
as a reminder that Mr. Harris submitted to the mayor and the council
Right.
some comments on October 27th directly to you. So you had that material as well.
right, thank you. Thank you for the reminder, Doug. Right. All right, so that, now I will close the public testimony portion of the hearing. All right, recommendation from staff, please, Doug.
Staff's recommendation is to adopt ordinance number 2020-2860 and do the second reading on November 16th.
All right, folks, time for council deliberation. First off, shall we start with any questions of staff? Stephanie, it looks like you have a question.
I have a couple of questions and a couple of statements, if that's okay. So the first is that I do think it would be advantageous to look at a sunset clause for this. I think this council knows full well how things done in the past come to visit us, either for the good or for the bad, but that, you know, it definitely is something that I would like to see in 5 years, us take a look and make sure that it's doing what we want it to do, and that we have some measurable goals that are being met. So I think that would be something I would like to see in there. And my understanding is that the revenue from this could be used to reduce SDCs, reduce other fees, and assist with other improvements. And I would really like to see that happening with this revenue. I think that's important. And then I have two questions. The first is, do we have staff at hand that would be able to closely monitor this and keep track of how well it's working? I guess I'm asking what the workload sort of is on the staff, and if we think that we can really sort of keep tabs on it in a way that we will know if it's working for us or if it's not working for us. And then I'll wait for the answer until on that one before I ask my other question.
So Councilor Doug Rux again. As we talked about in the housing work program, is we have 42 items. We have one of those is the construction excise tax. We have budgeted this year for a position in community development to work on housing programs. So there would be a person to be able to help monitor. We have to develop metrics and so forth for the entire program. I've also done some investigation with the Housing Authority because they do programs, and might they be able to help us on an administrative level with the administrative fee that's collected to help process some of the paperwork and so forth. They had previously indicated they would be willing to have conversations with the city on that.
Okay, thank you very much. So my other question has to do with SDCs, and it may be a question that's more appropriate for the next item, but I'm going to ask it here because I think it sort of applies. I'm wondering if there is any legality to or any precedent to having more than one SDC rate. So a sort of a lower SDC rate for infill in places where there's already a lot more infrastructure, and a higher SDC when we're talking about new buildings sort of on the outskirts or the, you know, sort of the limits where we're having to put in much more infrastructure. I'm just curious about that, if that's something that's ever been thought about, instead of having a blanket SDC, having SDCs that look more closely related to the actual building that's happening.
I would turn that one over to Karen Hoffman, our city engineer. She deals with the SDCs.
I was waiting to see if he was going to do that. Yes, that is legally possible to do. When we updated our SDCs over the last several years, we did speak about that, but the council at that time didn't, not necessarily for infill versus the other. Most times they look at it when they're looking at a large new UGB expansion area, those types of things, and that would get a different SDC. But it can be done. The council would have to look at a new methodology. We would have to do a new methodology for all of our SDCs and look at what those differences would be and bring that back in a hearing for the council to decide. But it can be done.
All right, Denise.
Sorry, mine's not a question. If you want to, mine's just another idea.
Bryce, do you have a question or do you have a comment?
All the above, but you know, Denise, you should go. Love hearing your voice. I'll go after you.
So this is something that probably came up about 10 years ago, where, or maybe not even that long, I don't remember now, time's flying or not, where after projects are built, we could have the developer and our staff meet, talk about how, what went well, what could be improved, how we can do things faster, smarter, better. This could go under customer service and affordable housing, find ways that maybe money could be saved. I'd like to see it done on a few larger, which we would have to define. We can't use just the word large. We also learned that, Doug. And maybe a house or two and maybe one larger development. So just so we could see kind of both people could learn from each other how to work together better and use each other as sounding boards for great ideas to be better. That's it.
All right, thank you.
Good.
Right.
I like knowing better, doing better, being better. Love it. All right, multiple questions to no one's surprise. First, so I know that earlier the school board came with the bond proposal, and significant part was like rebuilding and doing some other things. In looking at the exemptions, there's a couple things there. One is around public. Is that under like the Oregon code? Do we know would the funds from the school bond that would go towards building, would those be affected by this?
No, they would not. They're exempt from paying a construction excise tax.
Love it. Awesome. Second part, the sunset clause also would be in support. So I've heard 4 or 5 years thrown out, both from Councillor Finley as well as I think from Ezra. Doug, this question's for you and your commission. Again, I'm in favor of sunset clause, but I might actually wonder what your recommendation would be for what that amount of time should be, so we could actually assess the degree to which this is doing what we hope it would do if it passes.
I would recommend or suggest, Counselor, probably 5 to 7 years. You have to generate the money. You have to develop the partnerships with the developer, the timing of those projects of the developer. If your timeline is too short, if you said, oh, we're going to put a sunset on it in 2 or 3 years, we may have only collected, $600,000. A developer's project is still a couple of years out before they start constructing the homes. So again, I know this issue was going to be raised, and so I can't give you any factual basis, but my gut kind of tells me that 5 to 7 year window.
That makes sense. And I think in your estimate, again, rough approximate estimate, it's around 300,000 per year. So at 5 years would put us approximately at 150 to, what is that, 210? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Helpful. One thing to note, the one last question. So in your report earlier, you said in 2018, the median selling price was 340. And I think in Lisa's presentation, she said the average, this is on Zillow, is 400. So to me, that's like $60,000 growth in the median, which is a little bit shocking. But assuming, I think she assumed around a $500,000, but assuming it's around 400, that would be, based off my calculations, around $11 per month increase to the customer based off of a 30-year loan, which seems somewhat reasonable. My last question is regards to the previous comment a couple weeks ago, I believe from Crestview Crossing, talking about polling the availability for affordable housing. What are our options? I mean, again, if ultimately we're trying to increase access to affordable housing, and here we have a developer that's saying that if we do this, they will pull their agreement to reserve a certain amount of units. What are our options as a city or council to address that?
Well, in the Crestview Crossing project, they had put in their narrative that they were looking at doing 12 units at the affordable rate and putting deed restrictions on them.
Right.
So when that was generally all occurring, we had not even started the evaluation process on the construction excise tax.
Right.
So there have been discussions between staff and JT Smith companies in regards to that. I can say that, it hasn't reached a resolution until the comments were made at the October 19th meeting, where they came up with their position. No, I have not had a conversation with JT Smith since that particular meeting. I think there would need to be some additional conversations between the city and that particular developer.
I see. Effectively, the question behind my question is trying to assess, given the approximate estimate amount of funds we get, be able to balance out the potential loss of 12 affordable housing units, in your opinion? If we're assuming a 5 to 7 year sunset clause.
I would say, Counselor, I would need to sit down and have some candid conversations on their pro forma and what they're looking at. Developers are in the business to make a profit. Their profits are not always large on there. And so I don't have the numbers at hand to be able to answer that question factually.
Yeah, no worries. I know it kind of put you on the spot, and this is like your third presentation. So thank you for your hard work. I understand a lot, but okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Those are all of my questions for now.
I could just add one thing on your question there, Bryce, is that currently the city has the ability to waive SDCs for 2 affordable housing units per year. My experience has been that's been about $30,000 per unit. So if you look at it this way, if 100 houses, as Doug used as in his analogy, 100 houses at 300,000 each gets you about $300,000. So that would immediately bump us from 2 affordable housing SDC waivers to 10 or 12. And so that's another possible way to look at it. Other comments or questions, folks? All right, I've got a couple comments, and then we can go into further deliberation. And as Doug said, he'd like to bring this back on the 16th. As was learned during our work session, there is no magic wand or silver bullet to solve our affordable housing issue. We are severely rent burdened. Severely rent burden means that there are over 28% of them on housing. Again, Bryce mentioned it. It was mentioned earlier. The amount of impact on somebody, again, to afford a $450,000 home, you should make over $100,000 for it to be affordable. A $14 to $17 increase on someone who makes over $100,000 should not be onerous, I wouldn't believe. I think what we're talking about next, and Ezra mentioned this in the next item for discussion, by delaying SDC payment time, that significantly will increase the carrying or decrease the carrying cost for developers in our community. Something, on 100 homes, that could be upwards of $100,000 in a year. It was mentioned that we're sort of, people didn't know this was coming down the pipe. Well, again, Senate Bill 1533 was passed in 2016. We've been talking about it since 2018. Another notion, and I need to confirm this with Doug, but my understanding is that the legislation does not require a particular size or footprint for the affordable units. So, is that right, Doug?
It does not have a size limitation.
Right. So the thing is that, if we say we would like to see affordable units, we are not specifying the size of said units. They could be studios and 1-bedroom apartments, which could be built for significantly less than what we're talking about. And it would alleviate some of the big problems that Doug was talking about with us not having multifamily housing available in the community. Okay, and the other thing is that, back to this idea, and this speaks to Philip Higgins's comments regarding the economic vitality of our community. Remember, as we've probably heard on numerous occasions, this is no longer just a moral issue, it's an economic issue. Our businesses cannot retain qualified workers because they are simply traveling too far to find affordable housing. The other thing is, this was brought forward by the Affordable Housing Commission. It was brought forward by Housing Newberg, and we've delayed it once in April. So The only other change, I don't mind the sunset clause. I'd prefer it not to be a sunset clause. I prefer it to be a review period at 5 or 6 years. I think by sunsetting it, we're letting any future councils off the hook with having to deliberate it. And I think that they should be required to do so and not just let it sunset. And then the other thing is that I don't think that we should charge CET to housing that is deemed affordable. And that would be one exemption that we might add, but that's what I got. So any other comments, folks? All right, Doug, then we will move on and we will have the second reading on, where is it? Ordinance 2020-2860, an ordinance establishing a construction excise tax and creating chapter 3.60 in the Newberg Municipal Code, second reading on November 16th. Sue.
You need to actually have a motion, just like you did on the
Oh,
the
I
last
did. I
one.
need a motion that way, please.
So last, someone for a motion.
Yep.
I can motion. I'm wondering what would it require to include what is it you just said? Because I like that, what you just said around shifting from sunset to review, as well as exemptions for those that are actually, building affordable housing units.
Right. How would you like to handle that, Doug?
What I would suggest, Mayor, is that in the motion that is made to adopt the ordinance is to also clarify, to bring back modifications on the sunset provision to be, rather than being a sunset, to be a review. And then the other one that was brought up was to ensure that affordable housing projects are exempt from the CET.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
I'm curious from other counselors, and because obviously, Rick, you put it forward and I liked it, but do other counselors have thoughts or opinions that I want to just necessarily move forward with adding it if we're not in somewhat of an agreement or consensus about adding those clarifications?
That would come after someone seconds your motion and then you deliberate on it.
Oh, that's me being a newbie and not knowing the rules.
So you don't have an active motion for discussion right now on the floor. So I need
okay. Great. All right. So I would motion. Oh gosh, I'm gonna mess this up. Let's see. I would motion for the adoption of ordinance number 2020-2860 with clarification around a review after a 5 to 7 year period, as well as an exemption for those that are building affordable housing units.
I would second that.
And you want to add that you want to not waive the second reading. So then we'll have it the next.
And I want to not waive the second reading.
I'll still second it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
All
Denise.
right.
Thank you.
Further discussion. Now's the time to discuss all the above.
I can't find my raise my hand button
Oh,
on my screen. I'm sorry. But I agree with a lot of the discussion that's been said tonight. I also would like some sort of review. I guess I'm not super, I don't care much if it's sunset or review, but I would hope that if it was sunset, that we would, that the point would be to review it. I did have similar concerns to what was brought up around just how we will track outcomes around this to really know if it's successful. Although, I'm a huge proponent for affordable housing. I also think that it's a chicken or the egg, between economic development and affordable housing, and just hoping that this will be something that really does move the needle in the scheme of the 43 items that Doug has. So I really appreciate all the work that Doug has done. I'm sorry that I have been not super vocal on this meeting, but I have been really impressed with the amount of work that's gone into it, and also the engagement that Ezra's had and the community at large. So I am comfortable with that motion.
yeah, one clarification. I'm not sure if the comment regarding SDCs at various levels adds us up to number 44. I don't know, for whoever's scoring at home, maybe. So there you go. Sorry, Doug. Sorry, Karn. All right. Any other discussion?
My hand is raised. See, you're
It is.
forgetting.
Oh, it is, Denise. Sorry.
Got to get in practice. I just want to make sure we define affordable housing, like figure out a number to kind of a percentage to stick with, because sorry, I've lived through the not defining words before, and it's scary and sad.
Counselor, we're using the HUD definition for 80% of the median family income. So it's 80% or less.
Perfect.
That's actually, we have that language in our development code. We have it in our guidelines for the Affordable Housing Commission, and tried to do that with the construction excise tax. So we're consistent across all fronts.
That would be fantastic and unusual.
Well, the other thing that I will say, and this is potentially another reason to approve this, to be honest with you. And Doug and I had a little chat about this. The Senate Bill 1533 specifies that it's 80% of the county. It's actually 80% or over, which is odd in that legislature. But anyway, it's the county. And so that means Portland metropolitan statistical areas where we get the HUD numbers from. The thing that builders will know is that our actual income, actual family income in Newberg is about 20% below Portland MSA. So in many ways, the threshold will be higher than the incomes people make here. So it may not be as daunting for builders as they might think when they look at what the numbers and the income is at 80% of the Portland MSA. For information, family of four from the Portland MSA, 100% is $92,100. Right. So, there you go. So anyway,
I just have one more question.
Sure.
My hand's still raised, but that's because I forgot to unraise it and re-raise it. So if we do a review in 4 years or 7 years, can we do like a sunset and review, or review and sunset? Because what makes me uncomfortable is if there's not an option, if it's not working in 7 years, I'm uncomfortable continuing something that's not working.
Well, I guess the reason I mentioned it is that, sunset in my mind, it means it automatically goes away, right? So if you say on a date certain, it goes away. I would rather see it discussed and an actual deliberation made to say it isn't working.
So a sunset review and sunset.
Review
possibility.
With the idea of sunsetting it.
Yes.
If that happens. Yeah.
Dan unmuted.
Yeah, sorry. Typically a sunset review, you probably want to have some triggers in it as well for the future, the future you to think about, measure of success now that you might apply 5 years or 7 years from now. So that would be another thing to possibly add maybe a 45th or 6th item for Doug, but something to think about of like, what are the triggers that we measure some success, even within a range, something like that to evaluate, rather than being subjective to the values later on.
That's good.
Yeah, so real quick, I know we're trying to move to the executive at 8:30. Based on what you said, Rick, around the sort of inflated level of affordable, given how we're looped into Portland, do we not have the ability to generate, at least for the waiver, to generate that sort of affordability based off of the median income of Newberg? Or would would we think that would detract too many people from developing here?
I think Doug can speak to this too. It's doable. It's possible. You can do the math, but the HUD standard is pretty well adopted, and it just happens that Yamhill County falls into it. But that is the industry standard. Now, there's no reason we couldn't say, well, historically we've been 20% below, so consequently we're going to peg it at this. But you might be contested. I think that methodology would be contested. So, yeah.
I trust you all. And I see Doug nodding his head. Looks like a smart man. I'm gonna go with, all right. Good, great.
All right, any further discussion on this one? And again, we are just voting with the changes, and then we're going to come back for a second reading. Any other comments? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, do you need a roll call vote, Sue?
Yes, it's an ordinance.
It's an ordinance. All right, a roll call vote, please.
Counselor Cofield,
Yes.
Counselor Bacon,
Yes.
Counselor Finley,
Yes.
Counselor Yarnell Holloman,
Yes.
Mayor Rogers,
Yes.
5-0.
Thank you. All right, we've come to the part of our program where I've got 8:19 on the schedule. What do we need to get done tonight, Doug?
We need to do the initiation of the resolution for the population projections.
Okay. All right. So in that case, we move that the ordinance following 2020-2869 regarding the modified systems development charges, we will put to November 16th. And moving on instead to item 7A, Resolution 2020-3701, a resolution initiating an amendment to the Newberg Comprehensive Population Growth and Population Projections. Doug.
Thank you, Mayor. So I will be brief on this one. The 2013 legislation passed that PSU now does population projections for all the cities in the counties statewide. That was to normalize the methodologies around the particular state. This does not include the Portland Metro, which is Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington counties. So new PSU numbers came out for Yamhill County and its cities at the end of June of 2020. We now need to take that information and we need to put it into our comprehensive plan and update our tables accordingly. This is important because we're doing our economic opportunities analysis and we're doing our housing needs analysis. Both of those are using the new 2020 PSU forecast numbers. So this would codify it in our comprehensive plan that these would be the population projection numbers for the next 20 years in time. So this proposal, you're not making any decisions of affirmative or negative, but it starts the process for staff to put together the material, take it to the Planning Commission for a public hearing, and then back to the City Council for your public hearing. That's it, Mayor.
All right, awesome. Any questions for Doug, folks? I'm not seeing any raised hands. I'm looking though. I'm not seeing any. All right. Any other question? Any questions for Doug? Hearing none. How's about a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Stephanie.
I'd like to move that we adopt resolution number 2020-3701.
And a second.
Second.
And Denise with a second. All right, any further discussion? All right, all in favor signify by raising your left hand. And looks like that's unanimous, Sue. All righty, well, thank you, Doug. Thank you very much. And we'll be back at it with the others on November 16th. Thank you so much. All right, anything else we need here tonight before? We've got a couple ticks before.
Yes, Mayor. One thing
Yes.
is the A Newberg Action Plan annual report. We'll need to move that to November 16th.
Okay, we'll move that one as well to November 16th then. Any objections to that, folks? Hearing none. Okay, we moved a couple things to November 16th. All right, and let's see. I've got a reminder from Sue, item 8B, the Elected Essentials LOC training. She says this is her first warning on that. So if you're interested, contact Sue and she can get you signed up. Any other council committee reports, anything like that? Okay. All right. Well, let's take a 5-minute break and we will be back on it at 8:30.
Rick,
Yes.
you need to read the executive session script.
Oh, I was going to do it before when I came back.
Executive session. You need to do it both times.
Okay.
You need to do it before we end the open session, and you need to do it at the beginning of the closed session.
All
It's the
right,
part
I'm
full.
doing this before we go into break and then come back for executive session. I will now read the announcement required to hold an executive session. After the announcement, this Zoom meeting will terminate and the council will enter in a separate Zoom meeting not open to the public. The city council will now meet in executive session for the purpose of deliberation with persons designated by the governing body to conduct a performance evaluation of a public official. And this is per ORS 192-662-1, performance evaluations of public officers and employees. Representatives of news media and designated staff and other persons will be allowed to attend the executive session. No decision will be made in this executive session. At the end of the session, the council meeting will adjourn and we will not return to open session. We will now terminate this public Zoom meeting and begin the executive session in 6 minutes. All right. And we'll be back in 6 minutes, folks.